We'll move on to the next part of the program with Longhow Lam, and he will talk to us about a career in data science. Longhow is a very experienced consultant, data scientist, has been working for a freelancer, but was already in this field many years ago when the coding languages were different, but I think the core of it was the same. And he will tell you a little bit about what it is to move into a data science career and what the perspectives are and the opportunities. So please fill in all your questions in the Q&A that you would like to have answered by Longhow, and I'll give the floor to you now, Longhow. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Christella. It's a little bit ad hoc session for me. I haven't got that much slides, just one, to be honest, and I will share it with you. So can you see this slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so my name is Longhow. I'm working as a freelance data scientist now in the Netherlands. And yeah, I've been working as a data scientist for quite some time now, since '97. Before the field was called data science. So I've witnessed a couple of hype cycles, so to say, and also some changing tools, of course, and can tell you a little bit about that and why I think data science is such a cool area to be working in. So back in '97, when I finished my study statistics, I wasn't called a data scientist then. I was just, my first job title was an applied statistician. Now that sounds a little bit boring. So, but in fact, it is still a lot. What I'm doing today is still applied statistics. So I was creating models to predict which of the customers of ABN AMRO Bank would relocate, move from one house to another house, because that's an important event in the lifetime of a mortgage. Just classical logistic regression in SPSS. Sounds very boring if you say that is the work of a data scientist, but today I'm still using logistic regression, not in SPSS anymore, but in Python. But over the years, as you see in this picture, things have evolved. But I would claim that is merely an evolution in hype. In underlying techniques and underlying data and iterating with the business, not that much has changed, to be honest. So the end of the '90s, we got this hype data mining. I think some of you will remember, if you're that old. There was a big hype. I went to a lot of conferences, and people were predicting that by the turn of the millennium, if companies did not use data mining, they would collapse because, well, the competition would do it, and your company would be left alone without insights. That never happened. Well, company went bust, but not because they were not doing data mining. And then I switched from tool to SAS. I also worked for SAS, which is a very nice company to work for. Lots of benefits, lots of nice things that they give to employees. And yeah, you have tools like SAS Enterprise Miner, SAS Enterprise Guide. None of these tools are heavily used now. But 15 years ago, when you knew SAS, you were sort of king of the hill. You had a prosperous career in front of you. Not anymore now, but yeah, so then of course, and this is a long period, let's say from 2000 until 2010, you had this data mining period. Then we got the hype of big data and data science, right? So things moved to open source quickly, quite rapidly. And first, R was a big thing. R existed a long time. I used it already in my university. I wrote some introduction books about it. It wasn't that much of a popular language before 2010, but when this big data hype came along, R became very popular. And I did a lot of projects with R, let's say 2010, 2011. And then when the field of data scientists started to become really popular, yeah, Python came along, new tools came along, let's say Data IQ, H2O, all these fancy tools. And also from the last few years, the data scientist is not sexy anymore. It's now ML engineer or AI specialist or full stack data scientist. And I'm a little bit skeptical about these terms because what I see over the years, and also at a lot of different companies where I did projects for, the tool or the term is not that important. It's how you can manage as a data scientist with the stakeholders, the business. I've seen a lot of companies that set up data science innovation labs or data labs without a real connection with the business. So they were doing fancy projects, but they didn't know what problem they were solving. So most of these data science labs already collapsed. So a lot of use cases were thought of as being very interesting, being very hip to do. But if you don't have a connection with the business, then you can make a very fancy deep learning model, and you may enjoy doing that. But if it doesn't solve a problem in the business, then it usually doesn't last very long. And that is still going on. And it was 20 years ago also. So yeah, that's in a short story, a little bit about the evolution over 20 years time, so to say, of data science, statistics.
Can I ask you something about that, Longhow? Because
yeah, sure.
Yeah, because we actually got a good question, I think, in the Q&A. You talk about these hype cycles, right? And we see this in AI. And someone is asking, when do you think will be the next AI winter?
Wow, that's a good question. I think now there's a lot of hype on AI, whatever that may mean, because I hear so many companies talking about, yeah, we don't need a data scientist, we need an AI specialist. And I always ask, what's the difference? But I think for the AI winter, yeah, I mean, there was a first AI winter already, but that was more like an academic AI winter where there were less papers published by academics on AI. But if I look in, and I don't have a strong connection with the academic world because I'm not a researcher, but if I look at companies, I think there will come an AI winter, maybe not so much as a winter, but more as a realization that AI doesn't solve everything. And so that's a trend you already see coming. A lot of data science, machine learning, or AI projects fail. And what do I mean with fail? Companies don't get the value out of an AI project as from the start that they thought of. And I mean, that's a big thing because, yeah, if companies realize that AI doesn't solve all their problems, you will get less and less projects in AI. But don't be worried, I think there's enough market. So it's not the winter, but it's just a small dip in the new number of projects that company will pick up.
So you think there'll still be plenty to do for the people who are moving into data science?
Yeah, yes, my presentation now is of course to convince people to do data science. There is still a career, of course, but I would still argue that because there's a big number of companies who don't do anything with data, and if you don't do anything with data, you can still do AI projects, but maybe you shouldn't call them AI projects, but you should manage their expectations. You're starting this data journey as a data scientist. You do investigation in the problems. So there's still a lot of work to do, of course. But I think,
what kind of jobs? Because you've seen quite a lot, right? You've seen many companies, different kind of positions. What can people expect from a career in data science? Where will they end up, you think?
yeah, well, the nice thing for data scientists is I started to study mathematics because I like to have a general formula or general model that can be applied in one company, but also in another company. And to give you an example, I did my first job at the Municipal Health Service, GGD, where I was creating a survival analysis model to predict how long it would take before you got infected and you got the illness, the incubation period. Now, it's a completely medical setting, but I used a model, of course, a mathematical model, Cox proportional hazard model. A few years later, I worked at ABN AMRO Bank, and I was predicting how long it would take before people moved, as I told you, right? If you buy a house, it takes a couple of years, then you will move or relocate to another house. Completely different setting, but it's exactly the same model mathematically. And that's what I like. So then one project or one company, you're talking to medical people, and the other, maybe the next job, you will talk to people for mortgages. And then I worked at Adidas, you will talk to marketeers. So to me personally, that's a nice change of setting from now and then.
Yes.
So
And
that's
if
why,
I may be the devil's advocate, what is a reason not to go into data science? Like what, for example, for what type of person would it not be a fit?
well, that's a difficult question because I think you should enjoy, of course, mathematics, statistics. That's the whole basic underlying knowledge that you should have. So yeah, basically I can answer that question in a different way. If you don't like statistics, if you don't like data analysis, if you don't like working with different coding languages, then you shouldn't go into data science, of course. Because as you see in this slide, the tooling will come and go. Now it's Python, maybe in a few years, it's a different language, Julia or Swift or whatever. You should be prepared to learn something new every year, basically. Now,
Yes,
it's
so you
also
have to
true
be
for,
eager to learn as well.
yes, of course, and that's true for many occupations, right? So if you're a doctor or if you're a lawyer, you should also keep up. But I think with data science, the pace is a little bit faster. And of course, data science is not all about technique. Data science is also, in some sense, like business consulting. So if I go to a new project, the first thing I do is not install Python and deep learning packages. I need to talk to the business, the owner of the problem. What is going on in this company? Why are people churning, the customers churning? And so that becomes more business consulting almost.
And do you think, because actually someone is asking in the Q&A about AutoML, which is auto machine learning, I think, right? Is that because that might mean that more parts of your job get automated and it becomes more important to be a business consultant, or are there other subsets of a data scientist that are more vulnerable to AutoML? What do you think?
Yeah, so AutoML is this part of this technology that can generate from a given data set many models without the data scientist needing to think about it actually. Now, creating a model is only a small part of the whole data science journey. So I'm not afraid that AutoML will automate my job, because as I said, the business consulting part is very important. And also, once you've got a model, you need to deploy it, you need to explain it, you need to tell people how to use it. But also, how did you get to that model? You need to investigate the data. You need to look into that. There are certain things that is difficult to automate with tools at the moment. And AutoML, of course, is an automation of building a machine learning model. But that's only a small part of the project. But interesting enough, because with AutoML, you can push a button and you get nice models. So you don't have to think about that. So it will save you time that you need to talk with the business.
That is a skill that will remain important.
Yes, so I think that is the most important skill as a data scientist. You should be able to communicate and understand and framing the business pain into a mathematical or machine learning model. And then how to train a model, yeah, then you can push on this button AutoML, or you can do it yourself, of course, which is also a fun thing to do.
Yeah. And do you see, because in the previous session, Henrietta also told us that at a lot of companies, it was still a lot, you've talked about this evolution, right? But she said, okay, Excel is still very often used. Do you see that as well? Or what do you see as the most important thing to learn?
Yes, Excel is still used, and Power BI also. So as a data scientist, you should also be willing to do things that are not necessarily high-skilled data science techniques. So I'm doing a project now at MN, and they're not quite advanced in data science. And I know that. So their first thing is to get insights. So you can build a dashboard which you show some nice visuals. And to them, that's already very cool. For a hardcore data scientist, you might think, yeah, this is not so cool, but you have to gain trust into the business. You have to give them insights first. I mean, this is where a company that never used data science, right? And they want to use data science, but you cannot run before you can walk. So you should be willing to use tools as Excel and Power BI or any other BI tool. Not because you just want to do that as a data scientist, but to gain trust in stakeholders.
Right. Thank you. And one other point that I wanted to raise as a last question, because I think it's interesting in the Q&A. It's about ethics. Where do you draw the line of right and wrong reasons to use data and in predictive modeling? Do you see this have you seen this evolving in your career, and what do you see happening now?
Yes, I was once asked to work for a company that produced cigarettes. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So that on that level, there are certain companies that I don't want to work with or work for. Because I don't believe in, and that's a personal thing, that I could work for a company that helps people smoke. And with data science, you can improve their revenue, or so that's for me a line. And of course, for everyone else, that's different. That's just personal. Some people think that big banks are nasty guys. So on the other hand, there are, when you're doing data science, there are, of course, also legal and ethical borders. So if you're creating a model, I worked at ABN AMRO Bank, there's a strict guideline, and most companies now have these guidelines. You cannot use certain fields, right? Certain characteristics of customers, let's say gender, political belief, or that sort of things. For banks, they have to follow strict guidelines. For other companies, it might be a little bit trickier, because maybe they build models that are not in regulation, under regulation. So yeah, I was once working at a company where we had this app. We were analyzing app behavior, and we were thinking, oh, a customer A and a customer B, we have the geolocation. If they're close together, we know that they are partners, or at least they sleep in the same house. Can we use that information? Well, technically we could, but from a marketing point of view, yeah, you are crossing a little bit of a border.
I can
And
see how
also,
that's a complicated one. Yeah.
yeah, and also another example is a certain cable company was selling premium packages to watch, so movies. And one of them was erotic packages, and the other was gay packages that people could buy on top of their subscription. Now, there was once an idea, can we predict who is going to like gay the channel?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, these are just a few examples, and I think as a data scientist, you will work with, depends on the company, of course, but you will work with sensitive data, or let's say transactions from a bank, or if you work at a cable company and you know which customers are watching gay movies.
Yeah,
It's very
it's important not to forget what you're talking about, right? It might seem like just data, but in the end, you're talking about
it's
people.
people. Yeah, so I was working at the municipal health service.
Long, I'm really sorry, but we're actually we could talk about this for hours, but we have to move on.
Okay, sorry.
No. It's great to hear. I think especially these real life examples, they're really nice because like we're concluding, it's really easy to forget that we're talking about people and their choices in life, and that we can influence them. So it's a very responsible job that you have, and that you have been carrying out for years in a good manner, I think. So thank you so much for giving a bit of insight in this to our students and the people who are considering a career in data science. You're more than welcome to stay along for a little bit to answer some questions in the Q&A or the chat. But thank you for now.
Okay, thank you.
All right.